All right, ladies and gentlemen, back again, new week, Tuesday, September 17th. We are in it, right? Football season is rocking, NFL, college, a lot of stuff going on. We're in it as well, high school football, youth football. It is the season. We have a great guest on today. Coach Schuman will be with us momentarily. Jamy Bechler, guy wears a ton of hats. Author, podcast host, speaker, leadership consultant, former coach, athletic director, and I'll allow him to kind of give you his bio when he gets on here, and we'll bring him back as soon as Coach gets on. But excited to have him on. Get a different perspective in terms of what we normally talk about, youth sports in general, and all that kind of stuff. And there's Coach. Coach, I'm just finishing up Jamie's bio a little bit. Like I said, he wears a lot of hats, extremely successful in what he does, but we're excited to have him.
Yeah, and I mean he was a three-time Letterman at college. Basketball, football, track. He was a college coach for a long time in
Yep.
basketball. He's had a lot of success. He's, like you said, athletic director, associate athletic director. So he's kind of seen it from multiple areas, which is really great. And obviously now as a motivational speaker and someone that really teaches leadership to others. I mean, I think someone who has that multiple perspective of being an athlete, being a coach, being an administrator kind of gives you a unique perspective when helping others lead and motivate, and speaks to colleges across the country, administrators and coaches to help them really get better at leadership. So without further ado, let's bring Jamie on. What's going on, Jamie?
Hey guys, I appreciate you having me on. Now you said, Coach, that I was a 3-sport letter winner. There's two types of multi-sport athletes. There's Deion Sanders, Bo Jackson, and then there's people like me. So I was the guy. Deion and Bo Jackson coaches are fighting for. My coaches were fighting for me to be in the other sport full time.
You're like, don't you want to go focus on that one or this one? You said I'm a multi-sport athlete.
You really need to play fall ball if you want to get into this. So you might want to go do that.
I went to college to play basketball, and I thought I was a hot shot recruit. Like I thought, because the coach did a great job of recruiting me, I thought I was the next whatever at their school. And I get there, and the first week on campus, there's this sign I see in the dorms that say the football team needs help. We've had a lot of injuries, all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, great, I'll play football too. And so I went and talked to my basketball coach. Coach, the football team needs me, coach. Football team needs me. Do you think I could play football this year as a freshman? And he's like, that meeting lasted less than 3 minutes. He said, Jamie, I think that'd be a great idea. Why don't you go play football? And when you're done, we'll come back and see how you do in basketball. And I was a snot-nosed 18-year-old. I didn't realize at the time and have the self-awareness that if I was any good of a recruit, there's no way he would have let me.
There was no way he was letting you go do that.
No, not at all.
Funny. That is funny. That's real. That's great stuff. It's well, Hiram College. What is that? Is that an NAIA school?
It's Division III.
Oh, Division III. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Our football team. We just went and watched them play the other night, and my wife and I talked, and they haven't had a winning season in 40 years.
Okay.
No way.
So I only played 2 years of football, and we won one game. We squeaked it out, but we won one game when I was there. We were 1-19. I was the third receiver on the team. Which sounds good nowadays, but back then,
that was really not a good thing back in those days.
I think we had 7 fullbacks on our roster when I played. So we were not a 3-wide outfit there. And so the guy that started in front of me was my roommate. Actually, he was a transfer from Toledo, a Division I transfer. And so there were a lot of Saturdays I just wish I could have tied him up. Hey, Coach, I don't know where Ryan's
maybe
at.
We should have another drink, buddy. Like, let's have another drink tonight.
Yeah, Coach, I don't know where he's at. He said he was pretty mad. He didn't want to play anymore. I don't know.
Coach. I don't know.
That is funny. That's so funny. it's interesting listening to and it's funny. It's a place that I never really knew of. But
I
obviously,
mean, I think that's a lot of those Division threes,
Well,
right? Like there are
well,
so
you've
many
many
of
probably
them out
schools.
there.
you've
Ohio,
probably heard of Mount Union.
right.
Well, Mount Union was in our conference.
Oh, that's fun.
Oh,
And
really? Okay.
yeah. And so the first year that they won a national title was 1993.
Right.
And I was a sophomore on our team then, and they hadn't won a national title. We go to Mount Union to play. I'm on the kickoff team, and I'm on contain, which means I'm not very good. So I'm the contain guy, and we have the opening kickoff of the game. I run down there. Of course, I'm all jacked and don't contain, and they bounce it out to the outside and go score a touchdown. And that gives them the confidence to beat us 50-0, which then gives them the confidence to keep winning a national title. So you're welcome,
there you
Mount
go.
Union, for that
You're welcome, Mount
dynasty.
You
Union.
should. I hope they sent you a ring.
They should have. I saw their quarterback last year. Last year, I saw their quarterback from that team. We were both speaking at the Hall of Fame, NFL, or the Pro Football Hall of Fame luncheon club. We were both
Which
speaking
gives you
there.
which gives you a little perspective on that. A Division III quarterback is speaking at a Hall of Fame luncheon alongside of you.
Yeah, well, yeah, they couldn't find anyone, so I had to do it at the last minute. But we're both at this thing speaking, and so I asked him for his ring, and of course he did not want to give that up.
Absolutely not.
No. Well, it's great having you on. Talk about kind of how, first of all, how you got into athletic administration and that first part of your career, and then talk about coaching as well. And then we'll kind of lead into obviously all the stuff that you're doing now. But talk about those kind of initial careers for yourself.
Yeah, I coached for about 20 years, both men and women. I started off as a graduate assistant men's basketball at Kent State University.
Okay. Yep.
And in my first, this story is like a lot of people back in the day, so to speak. But my first 5 years as an assistant coach, I made $36,000 total.
Yeah.
In a couple of those years, I was married, and I was still, but that was all I was doing. I was full time. Not that HR knew I was full time, but I was full time mentality wise, and
that's a very similar story for a lot of us, right?
Yeah,
like that's kind of what it is.
You don't hear about that as much anymore. I sound like old man on the get off my lawn, but back in the day, people were paying their dues a little bit more. But I coached for a while, had some success, had some failures. Was good and bad at different times. Learned a lot. I eventually had an opportunity to go be an athletic director, a high school athletic director at Marion, Indiana, the Marion Giants, which is, toward the top for everybody's metrics when it comes to basketball in the state of Indiana. No one's won more boys basketball titles. Their gymnasium seats over 7,000 people. So it's a crazy Marion Giants tradition. So as a basketball junkie, that was awesome for me to be able to go be the AD there. So we did a lot of great things there in a couple of years. From budgets to student athlete leadership to hiring good coaches to winning a state title. So there was another state title. So that was pretty cool there. And then I decided to get out of organized athletics, and I started my own business, Bechler Leadership. And so we do leadership consulting. We speak. We just really try to help athletes be better teammates, better leaders, and then help coaches help facilitate that a little bit better, help coaches be more coachable. And then this past year, we actually added a small college searching firm. No one's helping small colleges find coaches.
Absolutely not.
So we started doing that as well this past year. So
that's phenomenal.
Yeah, you mentioned in the intro that I wear a lot of hats. We try to do a lot of things to help culture and help build that up, help coaches be better, leaders be better, so that ultimately student athletes can be better.
And I think that's a much needed thing. Coaches need to be able to get coached on leadership, and especially the younger generation, because like you explained earlier, back in the day it was much more you pay your dues, you kind of learn those things from paying your dues. You know what I mean? And now there's an accelerated process to everything, and there's pros to it and cons to it, but the con to it is they think they're ready for leadership, and they haven't really gone through the rigors of the highs and lows of what it takes to do that. And I think that's overall like a huge area where help is needed. Because I could only imagine, I'm just thinking about football, for example, but football coaches are that's at the college level, it's an expanding thing. And they're bringing on young guys all the time, right? At the high school level, you have a turnover now of younger guys coming in, but not as many that want to do it, right? So the ones that do it sometimes aren't as prepared, and they have to be coached on it, right? So talk about what you're like. You're really trying to get through to these coaches, how they can help lead the leaders that are going to be their coaches doing the job for them.
Yeah, well, one of our biggest philosophies, and not every coach wants to hear this, to be honest, is we have to be more coachable ourselves. It can't be just about us. And part of this is from what I'm seeing out there in the industry, that coaches are struggling with this, that coaches are, it's about me, my next job, it's about me looking good, it's about me getting a promotion or more money or whatever. It's partly that, but it's also partly I was the youngest Division III coach in America when I took over. Now, back in the day, 27 was young. Now it's not that young. But when I was 27, I was a head coach. That was the youngest in America. And I made so many mistakes, even though I was quote unquote prepared, or I was ready, or I was this up and comer. I made so many mistakes because it was all about me. Even when we did community service, that makes our program look good or helps other people, it was really still about me. It was, oh wow, Coach Bechler's program, he runs a great program because they're doing all this great stuff or this leadership stuff that he's doing. But ultimately it was about me. I didn't really care about my athlete. Like, I cared about them, but I cared about me a whole lot more. And so I still see coaches today making the same mistakes of making it about us as coaches as opposed to the student athletes. Now, that doesn't mean that you let the inmates run the asylum, so to speak,
Right.
but we have to get more where those athletes feel like they're part of the process, where they feel like it's our team, not just Coach Beckler's team or Coach whoever's team. And I think a lot of coaches struggle with that. I saw it, oh man, I'm forgetting who it was, just in the news recently, but it happens all the time. A player will make a mistake or have a turnover at the end of the game, and the coach will blame that player or will blame someone or will just go, off the rails about something, when in reality there were so many plays that led up to that. There were so many
Correct.
plays that dictated the game throughout. There were so many decisions that we made as a coach, and we need to be more inspiring as opposed to playing the blame game. And I know it's easy to say this in our living rooms, in our office, but as coaches, we play the blame game a lot. Hey, it's not my fault we lost this game. Hey, it's not my fault you had that turnover or you missed that throw. Well, it might not be your fault, but it is 100% your responsibility as a coach to either have prepared them, to put the right people in the right place, to set them up for success, or to make sure it doesn't happen again. And oftentimes we don't do a good job of that as coaches, of taking responsibility for what happens on the field. And I was the same way as a coach. It's not my fault they had a turnover. Well, maybe I put them in the wrong position.
Mhm.
Maybe I called the wrong play. Maybe I didn't prepare them well enough for a situation that they were going to get in. And I think as coaches, sometimes we don't critically analyze ourselves and how we could do better because we're trying to save face. And certainly I'm painting with a broad brush and generalizing, but I think if more coaches, not that you're apologizing 24/7, because the better you get as a coach, the less you're going to have to apologize.
Right.
But we should be a little bit more humble and a little bit more coachable because we want our players to be like that. And if we want our players to be like that, well, they're going to need to see an example at some point, because
Right.
if we say that their parents are idiots, well, then where are they going to get all that humility and coachability?
Absolutely, 100%. And I think a lot of us coaches were very territorial, right? Like we've always been leaders. We're most of these guys were captains or something of that nature, where you're always kind of the focal point of everything. And that's the same
Yeah.
with as a coach. When you're leading your organization or your program, you need to set that example. Don't just don't just talk about it, be about it, right? Actions speak louder than words, all those cliche things. And I think a lot when in this younger generation, it's very tough, right? Because like you said, they're
Yeah.
they're not willing to kind of go through the process. And guys like us coming up, like, you don't just start off calling plays because you're good at Madden, like you got to kind of go through it and learn those things and take those hard lessons in order to earn basically what you ultimately want to get to. And a lot of those guys that, they don't really do that. They're more, say certain things, but not act on it. And I think that the more guys and the sooner people realize that, the better you can ultimately become as a coach.
Yeah. But I realized there, especially at the higher levels, there's big money involved. But even at the high school level where you're making, essentially vacation money, you're getting a couple $1,000 stipend or it's gas money,
Right.
still at that level, there's ego involved, even if it's not
100%.
about, it's ego involved and I'm smarter than this 15-year-old.
Right.
Well, I hope that you are smarter than them, but
you should be.
yeah, you should be. You should be one of the smartest people in that stadium every day, or especially on Friday nights. But the thing is, your knowledge and how smart you are doesn't inspire a 15 or a 16-year-old who's going through, so many issues in life, or they
Right.
have egos also. So we've got to find ways as coaches to inspire our athletes to run through that wall that we say athletes don't do anymore. Well, some of them will if they're inspired. And, this is dating myself, but that old movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where you have that teacher. Yeah, it is a great movie, but you have that teacher who's like anyone, Bueller. He's probably the smartest person, about whatever science or math he was teaching, but nobody's inspired by him. And sometimes as coaches, that's how we get, we're just the Bueller, anyone. Our athletes aren't listening to us because, we know what we're talking about, but we're not inspiring them to go out there. And especially the kids that maybe don't have that star role, we're constantly asking them to sacrifice, the team, but then we're not praising them, when they do. Yeah. We're not praising that wide receiver when, it's a run play and he gets down in a stance, just like it would be a pass play for him, or he tightens up his gloves just like it's going to be a pass play for him, or he runs and gets that safety to bite. And that frees up that next level for the running back. We don't praise those people enough when they do those little things. And then we bang our head against the wall. Well, why doesn't that wide receiver go hard on a run play? Or why doesn't that offensive lineman do X, Y, or Z? Well, it's because they don't get praised enough.
Right.
And kids need that. Unfortunately,
especially now this generation with the instant gratification and all those kind of things. And I think and it's really something, it's phenomenal that you brought this point up because, we really, my team in general, we've kind of taken this approach where, those scout team guys are their most important players on that team. If they're not willing to go out there and basically get their head bashed in by the starters every single week, and then have to go play a JV game on Monday, and then, hey, you got to show up on Tuesday and we're right back to practice. Like, you don't get a day of just working out. You got to go back. I think those guys, when they feel like, and that's why football is the ultimate team game, right? It's like you're asking 100%. 11 guys to do something, and majority of those guys, you're not getting your name in the headlines when you do it, right? It's those other guys that you rely on to make you and ultimately the team be successful. That's where the praise needs to come in, especially even more so. And Dave can attest to it because he coaches his son's 10U team or 9U team at the moment, where those younger kids really are they're trying to feel it out. And do I really want to do this sport? And if you want to help those kids continue and play that sport for longer than just 1 year, then everybody needs to get praised. Everybody needs to understand that you don't have to be the superstar. You can still be that guy and have a high level of success. And ultimately, when we win together, like, we've all won. And I think that's, especially at the younger levels, as a middle school coach or a high school coach, where these kids really need a lot of that in order to just be successful at everything. They got 1,000 other things going on, right? Like, praise them for the little things that they do when ultimately, like, they don't have to be doing them.
Yeah, it's hard because, especially my first couple of years as a head coach, as a basketball coach, I'm not going to pat you on the back for blocking out. I'm not going to pat you on the back for running the floor hard. That's what you're supposed to do. Well, that's true. That's what they're supposed to do. But they also don't want to do that. Like, they don't want to do that kind of stuff. And so we've got to find ways to encourage them to do it, to inspire them to do it, but to point out, hey, this is now obviously you can't pat them on the back for every little thing that they do right. I mean, you can't do that, but boy, you can't go too long without praising somebody. Find some reason, catch them being good. Find a reason to praise
That's your
them.
job as a coach. Or, hey, your assistant coaches, hey, I want you to watch so-and-so today. He's been doing a pretty good job. Let me know when he does something good. Or, hey, good cop, bad cop, right? Like I thought Dave and I had, when we coached together, we had an excellent, kind of unspoken, hey, you're the good cop with this guy, I'll be the bad cop with this guy, or I'll be the bad cop, right? Where they were always getting some type of praise, whether it was the starting quarterback, or whether it was the dude that had to help with the water, or the chain gang on, or help him hold the chains on Monday. Everybody has a role, and football, when you have a team of 50, 60, 75 guys on a team, and you're constantly worrying about this and this, delegate as that head coach. Hey, let me know if so and so does good today, or hey, who do you feel like was a guy at practice today that we can talk about that isn't the guy we would normally talk about. I think that stuff's really important.
And you may have to go a lot longer in your practice or your game finding that one thing to say about little Jalen. He's been a screw up the whole practice, but then you catch him handing some water to some guys, or helping out the trainer, or he was cheering for something.
Picking up a piece of trash that he didn't have to pick up. Like,
you might have to wait a long time for some kids, because some kids are screwballs.
But you can ultimately find something. And it doesn't matter to these kids, it doesn't matter how big, how small. Ultimately, for majority of them, a little something goes a very, very, very long way, because unfortunately in society, like, they're not getting that at all times, right? Like, they're not just getting that, especially where they're kind of searching for it or trying to feel it out. I think that's extremely, like, that should be what's on the top of a lot of guys' lists, and it's really not.
I think what also is big is understanding what each kid needs, right? So
absolutely, you have to know your team.
Every kid is different, and there are kids, like, listen, I'll use my own kid as an example. There are times when he really needs praise, and there are times when he needs a kick in the butt. Like, all of a sudden he gets a little full of himself, right? So now it's not about taking somebody down a notch. It's about making them understand that in order to be successful, the same things are required: consistency, doing the right thing, hard work, paying attention to detail, putting in effort at all times. Those things never change. Having determination when you're on the field or in practice. Enjoying if you have something good happens, enjoying that moment. If you do something wrong or you make a mistake, being accountable for the mistake and then figuring out what can be done to correct that mistake. Right. So that's important. That's the thing that, like, and listen, everybody does it as a coach. Something bad happens, you get upset. You find yourself getting caught up. You may yell, or you may just show a face that shows you're upset.
Right. Body language, right? Like,
some
these
people
kids
just
read
show
body
a face.
language now a ton.
Yep. And then, but the key is, you have to once you gather yourself, you've got to go and put your arm around that kid. You got to be able, or adult, whatever it is. Right. And you got to communicate to them and say, hey, listen, I'm not mad at you. Okay. That's the biggest thing that people, and coaches don't understand sometimes, is that you have to make sure that they understand that you're not mad at the person, because kids, even including college kids, because you coach in college, you know this to be true. Okay. And I know I didn't coach in the NFL, but I was an agent in the NFL, and I saw it even with those guys. Okay. Sometimes people have a hard time separating someone liking me from the action, right? So they associate that you dislike them, not that you dislike the action. And that's kind of, kids obviously are easiest to understand that happens too, right? That's why you have to, even if you get upset about something, you have to try to almost immediately try and then put your arm around them, and then also explain what they could do better next time, because they immediately think you hate me, right? That's the first
thing. You take it very personal.
And high school kids are the same way now. I remember playing, like, I've had many coaches. Obviously, I'm older. I'm 50 years old. I've had many coaches scream at me in probably in the harshest manners and go on
Using
about it,
some
right?
verbiage that would not be okay today. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
no, that wouldn't be okay today. But it was. I was raised in a different era. I never really thought that the guy hated me. I thought he hated my performance.
Yep.
Today, that's all associated in the same thing. Literally, the kids think you hate them, not the performance, and they can't. And it's funny because I even think back to when I was 10 years old and like wrestling and stuff. If I won like 95% of my matches as a youth wrestler, but when I would occasionally get beat, and or a coach was coaching me hard and I made a mistake, and they corrected my action, I was just more mad at myself. I really was never upset with you might like briefly be upset with the coach, but I never thought the coach hated me. That's
Right.
what's changed dramatically, and it's part of the change in upbringing, the change of social media, and obviously why you see a lot more coaches approach things in a different manner when at all possible, because we're definitely more sensitive. I don't know whether it's a good or bad thing. I don't know the answer to that, but I know that they have a hard time separating coaching from personal interaction, and that's the hardest thing to me as a coach. That's why you have to know each person and you have to be able to talk with them. And I think, and you were an administrator, so you know this too, is that the hardest thing for administrators is to know whether the coach understands that or not, because they feel complaints about things and they don't really know. And a lot of modern administrators make the mistake of blaming the coach in situations when they shouldn't. When sometimes it's a matter of just having a conversation between the athlete and the coach to get everybody on the same page.
Well, there's no question. What I've seen is administrators cover their own butt.
Of course.
But I mean, coaches do too, to a degree. It seems like everybody's doing that.
I think
Right.
it's the era we're living. Everybody's looking to cover their stuff because everybody
Yeah.
knows all it takes is an allegation and you might be done. With the way social media is now, right? Like these things get out and are blown out of proportion and are sometimes like the wrong report, that guys go into it with that guarded type of I need to protect myself and my family first, which is a tough way to do things.
Yeah, but there were a number of occasions when I would have a parent come in, we would have a meeting, coach would be in there, I would hear both sides, and I would essentially defend the coach, or let's find a win-win solution. Let's figure this out. And then afterwards, I talk with the coach and I'm like, are you seriously this dumb? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say it that way, but I mean,
Right.
I'm like,
But you wish you
are
could
shooting
say it that way, right?
like you're,
it's
yeah,
actually
like,
easier to say it that way, but we have
like,
to be, a
yeah,
certain way
you're
as
shooting yourself in the
administrators.
foot. Like you
Right.
didn't make a very good decision. Like it's not illegal or unlawful or anything like that, breaking rules, but it just wasn't a wise decision. Like this was obviously not a good decision. You probably should have made that. It was going to make a parent mad.
Right.
Or
And
was
now you've put me in a situation to have to defend you and ultimately
Yeah.
put my tail on the line, right? Like,
Yeah, but
because
you learn, because I know I probably did a lot of things as a coach that would drive an athletic director crazy. Now, granted, I was at the college level, so you dealt a little bit less with parents then.
right.
Now
But not
there,
nowadays, like
no, there's very that line is blurred now between
Oh,
college and high school with parents. There's very little difference nowadays, but still, as coaches, we do shoot ourselves in the foot a lot with, whether it's just the way we talk to our athletes or the way
Yep.
we treat them, or we just don't give any thought to our punishment. Let's say, we're going to punish one kid one way and then,
right.
or we have this appearance, I should say, of being unfair, or we just, hey, it's my way or the highway. Hey, I'm going to do it this way. Well,
That's
we've
not
got
how
to,
it works.
we've
You
got to
can't cookie
explain a
cutter
little bit.
things anymore, right?
No,
You
you got
can't
to explain a little bit more on things, which is unfortunate, but that's the way it is. But, coaches forever have had to adjust and adapt with their game plans, with things that are going on, the situations and on their team. This is just another a way that we have to adapt and adjust. Now, we may not like it, but it's just, you mentioned, coach, about whether it's good or bad, we got to worry about their feelings a little bit more, or that kind of stuff. It's just a way that we have to adapt. It's the way it is. And we have to figure that out. But I actually think it can be a good thing, because not that it's a good thing that the kids are getting softer, so to speak, in air quotes, but I think it's good that it's making coaches care a little bit more about the individual than
Right.
maybe they would have. Now we can go overboard too, where it's just a kumbaya session.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I think that is, here's the one thing that I challenge it a little bit on here.
Okay.
Is that I think coaches, the majority of coaches really do care. Okay. And my thought process is that the overwhelming majority of coaches, I'm not saying that there's some guys that win more games than others, that I'm not talking about wins and losses. I'm not talking about, my thing is, I think the majority of coaches, especially as you move into like middle school and high school, those coaches for the most part really do care. And I think even at youth level, I think, even though obviously a lot of times the parents are coaching, from what I've seen is most of the time the coaches really do care. The issue on the one thing I want to challenge you on is the difference is the old school coaches had a different way of showing it, and that way will not apply today because people will not understand that. The second thing is, and I'm curious though, because you mentioned fairness. My personal belief is that there's absolutely nothing fair about life. Okay. Now you try to give everybody an opportunity to showcase themselves and to give them an opportunity to be evaluated. But like if I'll use it, two wide receivers could be very, very close in ability, but I see this guy as being better than this guy, right? And if me and Derek looked at two guys that were pretty close, okay, and I'm gonna use this as an example. Derek is 5 foot. What are you? 5'9", 5'10"?
Thank you.
Or 5'5". All right, say 5'8".
Yeah, well, in cleats, 5'8" in cleats. We're good.
5'8". Okay, I'm 6'1". Okay, and me and Derek would probably agree that this is probably the way a lot of it goes. He's gonna lean a little bit more if two guys are equal to a guy that he sees a little bit more in his own image. And I'm going to lean a little bit more to a guy that I see in my own image. It doesn't mean I'm right and he's wrong. It doesn't mean he's right and I'm wrong. It means that you kind of have, if their performance is fairly close. Now, is that fair, quote unquote? Not necessarily, right? But it's how the subjective world. And I always say to people all the time in sports is, this is the unfortunate thing about a lot of team sports. And I played both team sports, football, and I did individual sports, track, right? Track and field, there is no such thing as you have to be fair. There's a stopwatch, and the guy who finishes first in the fastest time is the winner, right? Everybody starts with the same gun, and there's a very, very few instances other than someone getting disqualified for something that fairness is really an issue. Team sports is very different than that because there's a lot of ways that people see things that are different. Like I might like X quarterback because of these skill sets. Another person might like X quarterback for these sets. Like if you were to take two pros, you got Lamar Jackson and you have Aaron Rodgers, right? Two totally different quarterbacks. It would both excellent in their own right, okay? But if I'm Coach A and I prefer this, then that guy's my quarterback. If I'm Coach B and I prefer this, then this guy's my quarterback, right? And you see that all the time. And that, to me, is a tough thing for parents to understand. Very, very, very difficult for parents to understand. And that's where I would say the overwhelming majority of issues, even when my son's on another team that I'm not coaching, even for me as a parent, because you think, well, I think he's better than this person, right? But the coach may not see it exactly that way. He may be looking at other skill sets that are not the skill sets that I value. So talk a little bit about that, because I think that's an important thing, because a lot of parents and coaches listen to our stuff. It's an important thing for people to really understand kind of how that works. What's your thoughts on that?
Great points. I don't disagree with you on any of those points. I do think coaches care a great deal about their athletes. I think sometimes we don't show our athletes that we care.
Because we have to be, because then it goes back to that whole MO of you're the tough guy. I
Yeah.
have to put on this Nick Saban type of, or Bill Belichick type of
Yes.
model. And listen, I literally just heard Julian Edelman talk about this with that persona, right? But meanwhile, behind closed doors, you could go to Bill for anything. You could go to Nick,
Yeah.
and those guys are the most, giant teddy bear that you could possibly think of when it came to those people. But because we feel the need to put on this tough guy persona, it leads to a lot of different things.
Yeah, and I'm not saying the tough guy persona is good or bad. I'm not
Right.
saying any of that, but take even in basketball, the legendary coach Bob Knight.
Oh, come on.
You're going to have a hard time finding any of his players you're going to only find a handful of players that didn't like him. Almost
Right.
all of his players are going to say he cared about them a great deal. But to the public, or the perception was he didn't treat players very well. Now he didn't coach the way I would have coached, but his players loved him. They knew that he cared about them.
Right.
I think it's important for our athletes to know that we care about them. And sometimes we don't show that very well. But in terms of coach, what you're talking about fairness, yeah, I made the statement earlier on about that's not fair, and then I kind of backtracked. The appearance of failure, the appearance of fairness. I think that's more important because it's hard to be fair because life's not fair in almost every way. But the appearance of failure to a teenager sometimes,
oh yeah,
they struggle with that. And it doesn't mean, once again, that you're going to stroke their ego for 2 hours a day. And you've got to walk around on eggshells, worried about what they feel all the time. But you do have to have a little bit more communication than maybe we would have had 15, 20 years ago with our athletes to help them maybe understand a little bit more about what goes into the decision-making process for different things. We know that they're not going to agree a lot of times, but if we can just open their eyes up to a little bit more, then we're probably doing. Because right now, most coaches take the approach of, well, this is the way it's going to be. And they don't extrapolate that a little bit further. Either one, on the front end, they don't clarify their expectations.
yes.
And sometimes we might say, well, we told them this. Well, we told them this
How did
one
you tell
time.
them that?
Or we did it in such a way that I understood, but did that 16-year-old understand? So we need to set those expectations clear enough so that those teenagers understand. Secondly, we need to then let our actions be aligned with what we just said.
Yes.
And oftentimes we're not doing that either. Our actions betray our words. We're a little inconsistent or even hypocritical with what we say.
Mm-hmm.
But then third thing is we've got to have those lines of communication open a little bit. So, and you mentioned it, football, there's a lot of decisions we make as coaches that are not measurable. You mentioned it, coach, in track. In track, everything's measurable.
Yeah.
In football, it's
Not
really
so
hard
much.
to measure who's a better blocker from the wide receiver position.
Right.
Like you can make up measurables, but at the end of the day, they're not objective.
Correct.
At the end of the day, it's our feeling. I trust you as a blocking wide receiver a lot more than I trust this other kid. Well, that's hard to measure, and it's hard to tell a parent that kind of stuff. And
Absolutely.
so the lines of communication have to be really open, where we're almost educating parents, we're educating the kid, and we're giving them hope that, hey, if you can do this a little bit more, you're going to earn my trust a little bit more. Now, that's tough because, once again, none of this is factual. None of this is objective. But some of this is going to be, you know what? Hey, Derek, the trust isn't just, you got to show me you're a better blocker. Blocking has a lot of trust involved. And so you're going to earn my trust by coming a little bit early for practice, paying more attention. In these other drills, you're putting forth your effort. You're not the first one to leave, or you're not, X, Y, or Z. You're going to earn our trust in a lot of different ways, because how you do anything is how you do everything. How
Correct.
you do everything is how you do anything. So it's not just on these 2 blocking drills that we did today in practice that earns my trust, because blocking is a trust thing all
In general.
because your other all the other players are trusting you that you're going to do your job, because then it affects them, good or bad. And so everything you do is earning trust. Now, that's a lot easier for me to say right now than it is to actually do it and to get a teenager to buy into that or to take ownership into that. But the more you can educate them and help them, and then catch them being good when they do something that earns your trust. So I don't know if that totally answers your question,
No,
Coach.
it does.
So, well, like Dave,
okay.
and I always equate it to this, right, Jamie? Like it's the same thing. Hey, do good in school, right? If I can't trust that you can sit in a classroom, pay attention for 45 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever that time schedule is, how am I supposed to trust you or put you in a position to earn that trust? Like, I'm not even going to put you on the field if I can't trust that you can sit in a classroom and do what you're supposed to do, because now I put you on the field. How am I supposed to trust you on 3rd and 10 when we need to know what we're doing, right? Or things of that related to that stuff.
In general,
right?
generally speaking. Yeah. Generally
Like,
speaking.
and if you put it into those terms where it's not just football stuff, now, okay, well, hey, do you hold the door open? Like little things like that, like those little, hey, do you, we told you to always have a pair of, sneakers in your locker in case we need to go inside. Do you have them with you? Like those little things all lead up to your opportunity to earn that trust, right? Like it starts way before we even step on the field or strap up our chin straps. Hey, I've told you how many times that the knee pads have to cover your knees. Like, why are we consistently out here having referees tell us we can't do this or do that? Like those little things. Oh, but coach, I got away with it. That's not the point, right? That's not the point. Set yourself up to earn that trust.
I think so. I think one of the things that I think you bring a really good point about is the parameters that need to be kind of outlined to them. And there's two things that I think are really interesting, because this is really interesting topic. And that's why it was great to have you on, because this is something that I think a lot of these topics need to be explored more in depth. I think we do a poor job overall in sports in exploring these things, because they really do matter, right? It really is a discussion of like, what works here, what works there, but parameters, you're right. So when Derek's talking about, doing well in class, right? Okay, well, if you're a 2.5 student, I need you to try to get to a 3.0. If you're a 3.0 student, your goal should be get to a 3.5, right? That tells me that you're putting in extra work. Because if you're naturally really smart, like you have kids like this. You coach a kid in high school, he's smart enough to get a 3.0 without doing a whole lot, right? Well, it doesn't mean he's trustworthy, though, because if he's getting away with something there, he may be getting away with something on the field or cutting a corner there. But if he's smart, if he's a 3.0 kid and he works and gets to a 3.5, that's probably the right parameter. It's the same parameter for a guy who's a 2.5, maybe naturally, and works to get to a 3.0. Those guys are basically equivalent because they may have different levels of intellectual learning, but they're both working harder to be successful. And I think you're right about those kind of the parameters. Now, what does become difficult, and obviously the higher level you go, I would bet my bottom dollar many more of these things are put in place. If you go to Division I level in football, they have 10 people putting these things in place. The head coach sets it up, and everybody else executes it, right? When you go towards the lower levels in high school and youth, which is really what sets the stage for what you're going to have when you get those guys at the higher levels. I think that's the hard thing. And until I started coaching youth, like I was in high school and I'd work with pro guys and elite players, I kind of understood that process. As I worked my way down, that process becomes much more difficult. And the parents, so you have a large pool of athletes at the bottom. And as you're moving up, those are obviously the better athletes, the ones that get it. They may get it without you ever having to tell them to get it, or they may have parents that are super involved with making sure they get it. And you start to work this part. The issue is high school is kind of like in the middle part, and youth is obviously the lowest part. And those are the widest two areas. And those areas, I think, have been very, very difficult for a lot of coaches. And that's where a lot of good coaches and caring coaches have jumped out. The top area, everyone wants that top area,
Of course,
because you're getting paid. You're getting paid, right? So you're getting
what
the
people
best.
don't realize is that's the least number of spots available, right? Like there's only so many programs in the country, and even if you are, you have to be on that upper echelon of coaches in order to make that money. And is it sustainable?
So I think that the big thing is, how do we begin to teach the high school and youth coaches who are going to ultimately send better kids for success at the higher level, which will help make their jobs easier, because those guys are already probably pretty darn good just because they got hired to begin with. They may have some things here or there, but they're pretty darn good, right? It's the middle and the bottom level that have the hardest time. What can we do to help those guys set these parameters? They're not getting, high school, they're not getting paid a whole lot. Youth coaches, middle school coaches probably aren't getting paid anything. How do those guys figure out how to do that with the window of time that they have?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question. And, two philosophical things, and then I'll get into a couple nuts and bolts. Number one is, I know it's cliche, but why are you coaching? Remember, and it might be when I coached, I wanted to coach because my high school coach poured into me. Well, when he died early at 47 years old of cancer. I cut out his obituary, put it on my wall right over. So when I sat at my desk, I saw his obituary every day. That reminded me every day of the why I coach. So remembering the why you coach, because most of us don't get into coaching to be rich, especially at the youth level. But why are you coaching? Number two is reminding yourself every day, I need to be a coachable coach. I need to be a coachable coach. How can I improve, grow, and develop every day? Because when I'm doing that, then that's going to lend itself more likely that our student athletes or our little kids, our 10-year-olds are going to grow, develop, and improve. Plus, that's going to be an attitude I take into practice a little bit. So two philosophical things is trying to remind ourselves what our why is and to be a coachable coach. But then from there, looking at it as, how can I inspire my athletes every day? How can I make this fun for them? Now, I know at the higher levels, sometimes fun is not a word we want to use, but how can I make this fun for them where the learning is good? And part of that is making sure the practice is planned well. Now planning and organization is not fun, but what's
Necessary.
What's not fun is a 10-year-old having to stand there while you explain again how we rotate in this drill. A 10-year-old standing there waiting 5 minutes for their turn to go in a drill because you've got a million kids in this drill and only one ball or whatever that is. Kids have like 7-second attention spans.
Right.
You have to, yeah. I mean, they're TikTok all day long. Boom, 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 swipe, swipe, swipe. Well, as coaches, we have to do a much better job. And I hate to say this, but we have to do a much better job TikTokifying or Instagramifying our practices to a degree.
100%.
I agree on that 100%.
And in order to do that, we have to be prepared and more organized with what we're going to do. If it's just me at practice, or if I have 4 other volunteers or whatever it is, we have to be more prepared so that the students, so that these kids, teenagers or 10-year-olds, they don't wander off with their mindset. Because we'll say all the time, well, these kids, their focus is terrible. They're not committed. They're not this, they're not that. Right. Well, we're not helping them with that. How are they supposed to stay focused for a boring 2-hour practice? They're not going to. And then we get mad at these kids for not being like us. So we have to do a better job of preparing and planning and organizing our practice so that, it's going to meet them where they're at a little bit more. And then once they get excited about something, then maybe we can stretch things out. Then maybe we can add a little bit to it. But we're
because then they're all in and they're plugged in for even longer, right? And I kind of say, it's the same thing. Like, look, guys, like I'm not going to keep you. You give them the whole look. We got to be plugged in for 20 minutes and then we're going to go whatever, right? But as a coach, like you said, it's all in the preparation and it's also in knowing your team. Certain teams last longer in terms of that stuff. Or if you make it more interesting or creative, or you kind of meet them halfway in terms of where it is. Like, I'll give you a great example, right? So my high school team, the old day of, these kids love technology. Anything technology is like what they're dialed into, right? So, the days of, hey, scout team, hold up a card, look at this, gets monotonous after a while. So we invested in a company, and this is a shout out, no free shout outs here, right? Go Route is it's a device, basically a phone or a mini tablet that goes right around their waist, where now we upload the cards, we draw them on Huddle or whatever, we upload them onto the cards. Now these guys all wear these Go Routes around their waist for practice. And as a scout team player, I don't have to come back to the huddle. I'm not looking at a card every play. I can literally line up, look down at the play, and know exactly what I'm doing. And just that little bit of technology inserted into practice, it's unbelievable. I've been bragging about it to Dave for weeks. It has literally, not only has it increased our number of reps in practice, but the buy-in from the kids now. I mean, you would think it's like, I open up the bag and be like, all right, Go Routes. I mean, you want to talk about a fight? Like, now we got some fights over the Go Routes. Like, I'm getting one, you're getting one, just because you added that little bit of what they need. And for their attention, they're not looking at a card, then they have to go here, go there. It's just bang, right there, go. Gone. And like you said, it's something new, it's interactive, it's like it's what they're on the regular basis of what they're doing day to day. And now now they can get going. And now we've seen just the overall every bit of practice be so positive because of this little like tweak that we made in terms of meeting the kids halfway.
Well, you'll need to clip out that and send it to Go Route and see if they'll
use it, right,
up
Dave?
some
We'll
money.
take that sponsorship.
We need him as a sponsor. There we go.
Absolutely. But you can also, and this gets, this is not as easy to do at the younger levels, but
Dave's in it. Like 9U, he's in it.
Yeah, but you can ask them for their feedback. You can get them where they take ownership in a drill. Hey, and it can start off, hey, we're going to do this blocking drill. We're going to do a blocking drill today. Which of our blocking drills would you like to do today? And you ask 5 of your kids or 6 of your kids, and then they're excited because you're doing the drill that they requested or something like that. And I'm speaking in generalities, and you could put your own spin on it. But if you can get their feedback on something and then you're doing what they said to do or asked 100%. To do, they could even make up something. Now that's at the higher level where they're making something up, or you ask them for the names of a play or they name the drill.
Right.
They name
like we allow our guys to make the signals. Like,
yeah, it's
little things like that. Hey,
absolutely.
I
can tell you instances too, like a young kids where this is with young kids and but like their favorite tackling drill is this thing we call shake and bake. Because they basically, the old days used to do these crazy Oklahoma drills, but you can't do that anymore. You modify it. It's a modified drill where
you want to be in prison.
One guy's gets to make a move within a space from an angle, and the other guy tries to tackle him. It's kind of an angle tackling drill, but they like it because there's a goal at the end, like someone's trying to score and the other one's trying to stop them, and it's the number one drill they always. We don't get to do it every day because it doesn't apply every day. But we try to do it at least once a week with them because they ask about it every single day.
The same thing with today. We're doing shake and bake today. We're doing shake and bake.
That's exactly what they say.
You're like
the same thing is with tug of war. So we do tug of war, but like we can't do it all the time. But we try to do tug of war once a week or once every other week because they love to do. We break them into 4 teams, and then they go. It's like a tournament. They tug of war. And they love it, and someone wins and someone loses, but they all have fun. They're kind of working together. So like I can think of off the top of my head, those are 2 things that I know every day. If I could do them every day, if they would do those drills every day, right? But at least it gives them something to look forward. At least once a week, they get to do it. They get something to look forward to. And those are just 2 quick examples. There's probably 4 or 5 other things that they've said to me. but I hear those two over and over and over and over and over and over again, just like we give out prizes, right? Derek knows this. Like, I'm big on giving out prizes. I'm big on giving out stickers on the helmets.
Yeah.
And we give out, like, I mean, you wouldn't know these things, but things like teeny mates or football cards and stuff like that. And if a guy does well, or if a unit does well, or a long touchdown, the whole unit gets it. Or so they look forward to those things, right? And
Those
not
little
everybody
rewards.
gets a prize all the time. Like this week, for example, probably the whole entire team is getting a prize that's gonna make me broke. But because they played very well as a whole, they had a bunch of really good things happen. And so basically the whole team will get a prize. But what basically they remember is, wait a minute, we did really well. And of course, you probably won the game if you did really well as a whole. And now we're all getting prizes. I want that feeling again. I think that's part of what you're talking about is kids want kids and teenagers. They're trying to replicate feelings that they feel are joyful for them. That gives them the experience, and they probably won't even remember the 90% of the wins and losses. That's my guess, because I don't remember it now at my age. You know what I mean? Like, I can remember a few of them. All right. But what they will remember, the fact that they got cards if they did something well. They will remember when they did tug of war, right? They'll remember that shake and bake drill.
Yeah.
They will remember that. But it's funny because the parents only remember whether they won or lost, whether Johnny got the ball.
Well, think about it, Dave. Like, how many compliments do we get, right? And even that, like, when the kid comes home from our camp with something every day on top of getting that T-shirt or whatever, like, yeah, the parents are like, well, what'd you do, bud? And then they can explain what they did in order to get that. And now it's, it just takes it to a whole nother level, and I wanted to touch on another thing, Dave. The whole, like, I remember, like, one of the greatest things I think that, I've taken from Dave's process of being a head coach and doing all of these other things is that, and we were talking about the individuality of each kid on the team, is not so much setting hard, fast rules, but more parameters or guidelines within the program that gives a coach that wiggle room that, hey, it's not, okay, you were late to school, so you got to sit the first quarter, because that hamstrings you in terms of every situation is a situation by situation basis. So a lot of coaches, I feel like, they come out and they're like, these are our rules and this is how we're going to get things done. Well, everything's a case by case basis in my eyes, because with the way the world is now and individualized, like I said, you can't cookie cutter certain things anymore. You have to kind of take it as that. So more guidelines, not rules. Well, I was curious to hear your take on, like, how you feel about that.
Yeah. In general,
especially coming from an athletic director standpoint.
Yeah, the higher level you go, I definitely think the less rules you should have.
Well, that's what I'm speaking in terms of, I'm not talking, I'm not going to give my 6-year-olds like,
right,
like whatever. Like, because now you got guys all over.
Right. No, but I was one of these guys that when in my first head coaching job, I mean, my rule book looked like the NFL, or
like a Bible.
It looked like the Bible or the NCAA rule book. It was crazy big. And I painted myself in a corner so many times. Yeah. By the end of my coaching career, I mean, you could pretty much put on a Post-it note what our rules were. And little things. And I know this doesn't affect you guys quite as much, but at the college level, like, I didn't end up having rules that were school rules or like laws. Like,
no, that's different. College is a totally different beast.
No, but a lot of times we might, and this could be interpreted different ways, or you could take your own approach to this, but like, I shouldn't have to put on the rules, don't drink and drive. Now that's definitely something you shouldn't be doing, but that's a legal thing. Or I didn't want to be toward the end of my career, I didn't want to be the enforcer of school rules.
Right.
Necessarily. So, but here's the thing with the rules. The rules, I think we should always be focused on teaching and helping them get better and setting them up for success whenever possible, not enabling them necessarily. But here's what I mean. We know, let's say it's 15 minutes before practice and a kid is struggling to get to practice sometimes. Well, this is more at the college level. You'd have someone go back to their dorm and
Yeah.
drag them or find them. But let's put it into high school football terms. A lot of times you have a Saturday morning film session, or just we're going to get together and do some stretching, kind of wind down from the Friday night game, let's say. Well, maybe you have a bunch of kids that are poor or don't have cars or don't have really weight.
Right.
You have
And
some
that's a struggle.
freshmen. Yeah. Some of that ahead of time.
Yes, you do.
At
least you definitely should. If
you are setting yourself up. We do things as coaches that set our kids up for failure sometimes. And now Will might say, well, and certainly I'm painting with a broad brush because not every coach does this, but we may say, well, they got to step up. They got to figure out a way to get there. Or teammates, you guys got to figure out how to get each other there. That's great and all on the surface, but it may just be, I have to go to Jalen and be like, hey, Jalen, I know your neighbors with Jawan.
Yeah. Can you pick up?
Jawan and Chris are your neighbors and they're bad. They may, their parents, work. They're not going to be able to get, could you bring them, or you go to Jalen's mom or Jalen's dad. You start facilitating ways. So you think about ways that kids could break rules, and you start facilitating ways to keep them from breaking those rules or getting themselves in trouble. You set them up for success a little bit more. Now, I know there's a fine line between doing that kind of stuff and enabling them. It might be a text message where, all right, you don't have to remind Jalen of something because Jalen always does what's right, but you do have to remind Jimmy and Ray about something, so you text them a reminder where you didn't text everybody else. Okay, well, that's unfair. Well, no, that's just helping them out, giving them a little bit more help. And I see this all the time. And I know this is going off the rule thing, but we see this all the time at the end of a practice. Maybe you run them. Maybe you do some conditioning at the end of practice. They're dead tired, or maybe they're mad because, it's 90 degrees out and you were yelling at them. Then you made them run. They got their hands on their knees. They're breathing, trying to get their last grasp of air. And you give them 3 or 4 reminders, hey, these are the announcements, or, hey, remember to do this, remember to do that. Right. They're not going to remember that because they're dead tired. They're not listening. And then you hold them accountable. Well, we like accountability, but did you do anything from that practice to the next day when a paper was due or something was due to remind them of something? Well, maybe they got ADHD, maybe they're autistic, right. Maybe they're just dead tired or they're not paying attention. Okay, well,
and that's where I was going with it. The special education model, right? Where some guys need more. Yeah, some guys need more. They need that IEP. They need that individualized type of, okay, or maybe you're not enabled. I mean, like you said, there's a very fine line. And as a former special education teacher, right, like that's part of this whole gig is these guys are going to give you those parameters within that educational plan, but even as that teacher, and this will probably rub some people the wrong way, but sometimes that's just enabling, and sometimes it's an actual diagnoses that it is what it is. Sometimes they just need that little bit of push. They need that little bit of tough love or that extra, whatever. But like, it's not like you're going over the top, but some of those guys need help. So like you said, set them up for success, not failure.
Well, there's so many ways to remind people nowadays. And I know it can get to be a pain in the butt, because, well, why should I have to remind these kids, especially at the higher levels?
Well, do you want to win?
Well, yeah, exactly. That goes back to kind of one point I made way at the beginning was sometimes we play this blame game and it's not my fault Jalen didn't turn in his paperwork. Well, no, but it is your responsibility to help him to remember that or to remind his parents of this. Or now if it's getting to be a point where I keep reminding him and nothing changes, well, then you have to evaluate, am I reminding him in the right ways? Maybe, I'm reminding him, I send him a text message. Well, maybe
you don't do that.
Shut off at 9:00 and you always send the text message at 9:30. I mean, that's a silly example, but you start evaluating, all right, am I doing everything I can do?
We're living in.
Well, my son's phone goes off at like 7. He's a teenager, a 14-year-old. His phone goes off at 7. Whether or not we're good parents, I don't know. But
good for you though. Good
but
for
if
you.
his coach were to send him a text message after that, he's not going to get it. So if you know that about an athlete, send the parent a text message. Or there's so many ways we can look at this. And I'm not saying to enable people. I'm not saying fill out paperwork for people. But what I am saying is I think as coaches, we need to step up a little bit more sometimes, or have our assistants or our volunteers, spread out that work. But how can we remind our athletes and set them up for success a little bit more, as opposed to being a gotcha coach? Oh, I gotcha. You screwed up.
Those
I'm going to punish you.
That's not smart. That's
One
not
of the
smart.
things that I think administrators can help with, and this just kind of really popped into my head, and I was just thinking about myself when I was a high school coach for 20 years or 19 years, and the things that I would deal with. And you brought up a point about, like, there's so many things as a head coach. Did I text this group here? Did I send something to this individual here? Did I talk on the phone with this guy here? Did I get back to this parent there? One of the things that administrators, I think, should help head coaches in all sports with a lot more. And the reason why I say this is because remember, Derek, when we had Dell, he was just phenomenal with this. This
one of a kind type athletic director.
He
Like,
tried
that's a once in a lifetime guy.
Yes, but I learned. I mean, we were only with him for a year because he left, and then eventually we left because of that. But he was great at taking as many things off the coach's plate as possible, meaning like paperwork, even sometimes equipment, like even to his own detriment. The way he looked at it was he was paid full time as an AD, right? Even though the coaches, their jobs basically were year round, even if
this is my job.
He tried to take away as much of as possible and made you the helper, as opposed to making you the person who has to gather it all up. Like,
and he had a great perspective because he was a coach for a long time. So he always used to say, like, because I asked him one time, I said, like, you really do a lot more, and it was kind of like, hey, I just try to handle everything that annoyed me as a head coach. Right. So as my job here, it's to make you focus on your team, your players, and those things that were those little bit extra, or those, annoyances. If I can take that off your plate, now that allows you to just be a better coach, and it's more time for the kids. And that was his explanation. I thought it was so logical, and I'm like, wow, that's really kind of like eye-opening, right?
I'll give you a great one, Daddy. This is a simple one, okay? And nobody ever does this, and he did this. When the football season ends, right? Okay. Obviously, if you make the playoffs, unless you win the state championship, everybody's upset after because you lose, right? So unless you're the champion, you lose. And if you didn't make it that far, you're playing in probably a game that doesn't mean that much. So yeah, you might be slightly happy, but you're not that happy. Okay. So basically at the end of the year, everyone's usually, unless you win the championship, has some level of they're sad it's over, or they wish they could have played one more play. What he did was he said, listen, we're going to collect the uniforms at this time, and I will be there. And if you could come down, I'm going to be there from, let's say, 10 to 12, have all the players come in. I'll give you the message to send out, and I'll start taking all the stuff from them. Okay. And then you can help me organize it at the end to make sure we just put it all in the proper place. But he basically collected the majority of it and put it all in the place. And then me and a couple of the assistants would help just put it away with him. And he took that off the plate. Whereas usually what happens for a head coach, and this is all sports true, mostly, but usually what happens in high school is the season ends, and either right away, what I used to do to try to so you didn't have to have a huge headache, you would have these piles set up, and everybody puts their stuff in a pile, and everybody is basically really upset, and they're putting their stuff in a pile. It's a big mess, and then you and your coaching staff has to go put this away. It's the end of the season, and you don't really know where to go with it, right? Because you're waiting for the athletic director to tell you the next day where you can put it. This guy took that all off your plate. And I thought that was an example of, you know what, now as an administrator and the coach is are all they're working together, and he's saying, I want to let you be able to coach and handle the difficult issues that you have to handle as much as possible. And I want to take off your plate as much as the paperwork, as much of the administrative stuff as I can. Not everything can be taken off your plate. It's crazy to think that would be the case. But he would take so much off your plate, and he would just let you know, okay, hey, here's the list of the guys that haven't gotten their stuff in for physicals, right? And all they got to do is come down to my secretary, give it to her, she'll go through it, and she'll tell them, right? And we would get that list, and I would say, hey, you haven't gotten this, and then we could go and call the parent. But it was so well organized from that standpoint. It allowed you to be more of a coach and be able to be more with your players and less the bad cop, so to speak. It was really, really a really cool thing. And I think I think you talked about it obviously extensively, but I think that the biggest thing to me is that from administrative to coach to parent to athlete, everybody has to understand that we're all kind of working towards a common goal. And that if we're combative in any one of the 4 areas, it's not going to work. Any one of those 4 areas are combating with each other. Now, 1 or 2 individuals can be managed in that process. But if you start to get to 7 or 8 parents, or like
now you got the inmates running the
3
asylum.
parents, 4 athletes, because sometimes athletes can be combative, but their parents are great. And sometimes the athlete could be great and their parent is combative. You know what I mean? And sometimes the administrator can be combative and the coach is great, or the coach could be combative. And so the more of those people that aren't on the same page, the more likely you are to have a problem with success. And to me, it doesn't mean that anybody is actually in the wrong. It means that there hasn't been communication up and down that line, okay, that people are able, and everybody's on the same page of where everything's going to go. If you escalate this is what's going to happen. If you do this, if you I don't know, if you punish a kid in a certain way, right, that's really not along the lines excessive, let's say, excessive level of punishment, whatever that is. Like you get mad at a kid and everybody's done practice and you run him 20 sprints. That would be like, okay, you're going on. You run him 2 or 3 sprints. If you're trying, I'm not a big fan of using conditioning and strength development as a punishment because they start to associate that. Yeah. But there's a lot of coaches that still do it. You run them 2 or 3 sprints and you say, hey, listen, you know what? You're going to use this opportunity to get faster. So that can work. But if you go excessive, then it goes the other direction. And I think the point you made about at the end, like, and me and Derek had brought on this guy, Tony Holly, sprint. Was a football coach.
Yeah, Tony Holly, great guy.
With him. But his whole thing is like, if you're utilizing strength conditioning or speed development in your practice, utilize it for speed development. So at the end, even with youth kids, I mean, if I'm going to run 5 sprints, we're going to give them a little bit of a break and make sure it's full speed, right? Because we say, hey, this is to get you better. These 5 hills, we're only running 5 of them. This is just to get you better so you're stronger, right? And so they know that there's association with the betterment of what they're doing. It's the same thing with, like, we started out the year, like when I first started coaching, every time someone did something wrong, you would do up downs. You want to be very selective when you use. If you use punishment, you have to be very, very selective, and it has to be, to me, a point that has to be driven home that hopefully you don't have to ever use it again, that they can learn from. Because otherwise, everything should be for betterment, in my opinion. I don't know.
Yeah.
If I'm wrong.
No, I would agree. And I would even, I mean, I've never, I shouldn't say never, toward the end of my career, I was very anti-conditioning drill, even for conditioning.
Yep.
So there was a purpose to the drills, but I went away from that just because, hey, let's like in basketball, I mean, you can just play a lot of full court and get a lot of conditioning.
Exactly.
Of course.
But we actually did pass patterns. We would do with our athletes. We would let them be wide receivers and and I would throw them balls and stuff. And, that wasn't the greatest conditioning drill, but it was fun. And we would do
Coach,
tag.
sometimes you
We
got
would
to
do,
spice it up, man. Sometimes you got to think way outside the box and utilize like something that's going to click for these kids, especially with the way, and Dave and I talk about it all the time. We try to push multi-sport athletes like, hey, man, like maybe now you just found something else, or just to switch things up for these guys in terms of that nature. It's so important.
yeah. And we even went with, we did a lot of morning practices or morning workouts, 6 a.m. type stuff. And we started going with, when we were doing conditioning, we started going with a lot of like cardio equipment or aerobic equipment. And, whether it's the bike, the treadmill, the stepper, the elliptical, those kinds of things. And then we would keep a chart, and it was a competition every day.
Well, that's
And
the other part. When you put
That's
things
a
on a
big part of it.
board, right? And now
yep,
you're ranking guys or first, second, third. And then we'd always took it a step further and been like, hey, you do this, you get a t-shirt. You do this, you get gloves. You
yeah,
do this, you get a towel. Like that reward system, say what you want about it, but when kids know they're gonna
oh
get
yeah,
something and they see a finish line or something of that nature, when you put their names up there, man, it changes the way they do things.
yeah. We did. We also did where if they beat the coach, if they beat me on a
Oh,
certain day, then they got out of conditioning, or they didn't have to wake up the next morning, something like
right.
that. And but we went to that primarily because I wanted to take the pounding off of their legs. Like
Yeah.
I knew they weren't ready in the morning. I didn't, excuse me, I didn't want to fight that too much. And I
Right.
still thought that we could get some decent conditioning out of them. It wasn't going to be as perfect as running. I know that, but I figured, hey, it's going to take less pounding, and they might enjoy it a little bit more. They can listen to their earbuds,
Yep.
and they're still competing for times. They're
Right.
still,
That makes
Right.
sense.
hey, I know what the
Yeah.
record is. I know what this week's record is, or last week's record is on the elliptical machine, or the stepper machine, or whatever. And I'm going to try to beat that today. And if nothing else, I'm going to beat coach today, so I don't have to come tomorrow morning.
Right.
No, there's no
Phenomenal.
doubt about it. And those solutions are so. I mean, I guess. Well, I would think that if you keep pitching colleges and high schools and across America, you probably have endless business as long as they got the capital to be able to bring you in. You know what I mean? But it to me is a thing that it's this forum of discussion to get to solutions that are. It's not just about being like a better way of performing, but it's enabling them to figure out how they can enjoy their journey as well. And I think that's harder than ever. And then my question on this is, and this is going to be a tough one. By the way, you've handled obviously, because me and Derek are coaches, we deal with these things all the time. So you've handled these questions unbelievably well.
Thank you.
But one of the things that I find is so challenging for coaches now, and this is college, high school, and youth, they're all dealing with this now, is that if I'm unhappy as a player, I can go over here. You don't give me the answer I want, okay, which is going to happen if someone's a backup or someone's not playing where they want to play, or a multitude of reasons. I'm going to go over here and leave you. Okay. Now, most coaches' answers, including mine, probably is I want you to stay because I like you and I think you could be very valuable, but you should do what's best for you. That's in the old days. That wasn't, listen, the old days, I'm going to sit down with you. I'm going to talk with you. I'm going to have a conversation, figure out what is, but my thing now is because everybody's going to have some level of unhappiness. We try to figure it out if we can. Okay. If someone's unhappy, we try to figure it out. But ultimately, you have to do what's in your best interest. Now, that's changed tremendously in sports, and I think it's the pros. This is not really a relevant thing because they have salary caps, and you can be as unhappy as you want. You're under contract,
Right.
You're got to stay there. But in college, high school, and youth, and college has led with this, with transferring and being able to leave at any time. And there's pros and cons to it. The pro is no player is stuck. I was a player. If I was if I was stuck, I would be, I would be unhappy, right? The flip side of it is you may not be able to salvage a potentially salvageable situation. And I'll use myself as a simple example. It's pretty easy to do. My first year in college, I was not used to being third string, and I thought I should have played right away. Right? I was ready to leave. My first 6 months, I was ready to leave. My father told me, if that's really what you want to do, we can do it, but I think you should try to stick it out. Right? I stuck it out. I had an injury, and then I was the starter the next year. That was great, all well and good. I started. I did very well. Then my coach got fired. New coach came in. I had a back injury, and I was out for a year, and I came back, and then that coach didn't like me at the position I was playing. Right? Now, luckily, because back then, if you transferred, you have to lose a year, and if you went down a level. If you stayed at the same level, you'd have to sit out a year. So I stayed. They flipped me to the other side of the ball. I ended up starting there, and I was successful. But if I were to think about it in today's terms, I probably would have stuck out the first one because I was young. The second one, when the new coach came in and said, "Hey, I thought, this is not. I don't think you're that." He didn't say he didn't think you were good there. He thought there were other people better there. I'll flip you over to the defensive side of the ball, and we'll see if you can have success there. It worked out. But when he would have decided that in today's world, I probably would have thought to myself, I should leave. Okay. And Derek, does that make sense? I mean, it's kind of, I'm trying to be practical in how I'm thinking about it. I think that
absolutely. I mean, look, you could literally look at my situation as well, right? Like, I started out at one school, had, some family issues where my cousin was, ultimately passing away from cancer. I wanted to move home, and, you kind of make those moves based off of certain things. But like exactly what you're saying, with the way these guys have the ability now to almost transfer without penalty or leave without penalty, right? Like, they have a very different perspective of how they go about things, knowing that they have that escape, I guess, if you can, that they can go do it,
And my long-winded question on it is simply this: How do you? Is my approach a reasonable approach with trying to handle people that are I might leave or I'm not happy. Try to solve the problem. If not, you tell them if we can't solve it, I want you to be successful. I don't want to be holding you back.
Right.
Because I see a lot of the coaches kind of at the college level, they definitely have that approach.
Right.
At the high school level, now you're starting to see that approach as well, because in New Jersey and in Florida and Texas, you could transfer. I don't know if in Texas you can, but in Florida you can, and most of the South, you could leave a school and go to another school with basically very little penalty, which is okay with me. It's just, what would you advise coaches to handle those situations? Because you don't want to have like an influx of your whole team coming in there, right? But you also want to manage the process the right way, so everybody thinks, okay, I made this decision that was in my best interest.
Yeah, I feel like if I had the answer to this, I would be making millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Great answer, Coach. We just wanted to see what you got.
How do I, at the college level, how do I go against the NCAA and their stupid decision-making process of just opening it up and making it the Wild Wild West?
It's insanity.
Yeah, and I believe you should be able to transfer. I just don't believe it should be zero consequences whatsoever, and zero.
Agreed.
Not penalty. Penalty is the wrong word. Consequence. Right. Consequence is a negative word, but it can be positive and negative. But I do think the NCAA they just knee-jerk reacted. They went from, really, really strict
jumped the gun real fast.
Yeah, they went from one extreme to the other, and there's a lot of spectrum in between.
Sure as hell didn't think it through.
Well, yeah, but there's a lot to unpack here. I'll try to simplify a couple of my thoughts here. Number one, I don't think you should try to force somebody to stay. I know you weren't saying that, but you don't. Once their mind is made up, rarely are you going to be able to convince somebody otherwise. Yep. For the most part. But where I think we can use, let's say Jalen decides to transfer from your school. He tells you he's transferring. You may not be able to keep Jalen there, but are there some parallels to Jalen's situation with Jawan and Chris's situation over here on your team still? So maybe Jalen's going to leave, but Jawan and Chris, they might leave after a few months if something doesn't change. And so maybe you're able to change the way that you treat them, the way you communicate with them, the way you interact with their parents, the way that you utilize them on the football field even. Maybe Jalen could have been played on defense instead of offense. Maybe, he was I know I'm simplifying, or I'm using maybe a specific example, but maybe he was a running quarterback. Well, but he sat the bench, but he could have been in the slot, or he could have been, one of your guys in the wing T or something. I know I'm going off a little bit, but could
No,
you
no,
have
it makes
utilized him a
sense. So
little
you're
bit?
understanding.
So you're not going to keep Jalen in your program, but maybe the lessons from Jalen leaving get you thinking, it gets your mind percolating, and it helps with the way that you handle Jawan and Chris and what you're going to have to deal with them 4 months from now or a year from now. Maybe you can use those lessons. There's some parallels there. The other thing is, with your athlete leaving, let's say, all it might do too, you don't want to force them to stay or try to convince them to stay, but it may not be something where it's a foregone conclusion that they are going to leave. So not that you give into their demands less necessarily, not that they hold you hostage, but it might be just some simple things of, you know what, I was never able to, I kept getting suspended for these 8 a.m. Saturday practices. Let's use a specific example that may or may not ever happen, but I couldn't ever make it. You guys knew I couldn't have made it. Well, maybe you can make a 9 a.m. practice instead. Maybe there's something that you can compromise on. Once again, not letting the inmates run the asylum, but you never know with these kids and their parents. It might just be one straw that broke the camel's back. And maybe you don't totally give in, but maybe you look and say, you know what, I can adjust something. If I adjusted this, well, it's no big deal to make it a 9 o'clock practice instead, let's say. Or, you know what, maybe I can have someone come pick you up, or maybe you have a ride issue. We never know. Sometimes just one thing that we say to a kid turns them off and they remember that. Or maybe it's just one event that happened. And I'm not saying, once again, I really want to make this clear. I'm not saying we give into their demands, but sometimes things so trivial. There's little trivial things that can get in someone's brain and they just can't get past that. And maybe if you could nip that in the bud ahead of time, or retroactively or whatever, be like, you know what, I think we could change this. I think we could do something a little bit differently on this. And I don't know what that could be for your program or anyone else's program, but there might be something. So if you could get to the root of why they are leaving, it just might be that they're playing time and you can't change their playing time. But it could be, you know what? Have you ever thought about playing on defense? Or have you ever thought X, Y, or Z? Would that be something you would consider? And if you have a good relationship with them, if you've been depositing into their emotional bank account, you may be able to make a withdrawal that doesn't make them stay for the rest of their career, but it might make them give you 1 more week, or it might make them give you 2 more weeks.
Or the season goes better for them. And then
it's
they might
possible.
move on they might move on anyway, but at least they walk away saying, you know what, all right, he's not able to solve my issue, but the guy tried to make it the best experience that he could. And I think you're right about that. That's a very, very great perspective on it, because I do think those are among the most very, very, I mean, it's the most difficult thing of all, right? Because I do believe there's a trickle down, like, people can say whatever they want, but when it happens, once college, see, when they did that in college, they did it really to try and help the players, right? Like the mindset of why they did it was not negative. Okay. It was actually positive as to why they didn't want players to be stuck. They didn't, but what basically happened was it had a huge effect, obviously, in the college ranks, but it has, I think, an even larger effect as you move down, because what people look and watch on TV is what they think the world should be when it comes to them in their smaller experiences. If Johnny, who's the greatest player in the state of Wisconsin, is unhappy at the University of Wisconsin, okay, and I don't like what's going on in my little town or my high school, then I should find another thing. And sometimes they're right. Sometimes they're right. Okay. Sometimes I say sometimes, and this happens in college a lot of times, but sometimes there is no solution. I think this guy's ahead of you, and I can't solve that for you. You know, I can't
Yeah.
really solve that.
Yeah.
I want you to do the best you can. I'm going to try and figure out a solution. If we can't solve it the way that we all think is the best way for you, and the best way for the team, okay, then you have my blessing to do whatever you need to do. You know what I mean? Because ultimately we want you to be. Our goal is for you to be successful, and if that's with us, fantastic. If
Yeah.
that's with somebody else, fantastic. That's the way I look at it. You know what I mean? It's like, because ultimately I want you to be successful, and it's not always that me or our team or this college or what can get you there, but we want you to get there. It just may not be with us. I think that's always a fair thing, and I think that the way coaches should always handle it is, if somebody is truly unhappy and no matter what you do and you can't get them to where even listen, even when they're great and they say, yeah, let's try to figure it out. You try to figure it out. It just doesn't get there. And they say, ultimately, I want to move on. And, the best thing I think you could say to them is, hey, listen, I want you to be successful. So when you go to this next place, whatever this place is, do the best you can and try to be successful there. But a lot of times what happens is people are unsuccessful because they think they're doing all the things that are necessary, but they don't. And that's the thing that I'm not going to ask you to answer that question, because I don't know the answer to that question. And any answer you give, there's probably a counter to it. But when you talked about the parameters, I think that's phenomenal. I think that that's a huge thing to help them understand that. And ultimately, you're the man in the mirror. Like, even when they're young kids, the parents can help them with this. Look in the mirror. Did I do everything I'm supposed to do? Okay. I did. Great. Then we need to figure, did I do everything I'm supposed to do? Well, I did all these things, but I didn't do these two things. Okay, can we fix those two things? Yes. Great. Can we not fix those two things? No. Okay. Then we're limited to an extent as to what we're going to be able to do. And I think that ultimately there's a big thing in the home that is probably an underlying issue to all of this, which makes it harder on coaches, which makes it harder on athletes. And in the home, there's a lot of things now that pull parents in different directions that go way beyond just, are you a good parent? You know what I mean? Their job. Right. Most of the time, both parents, if you have two parents, they're both working. If you have one parent, that parent's probably working all the time, so they can't spend as much time with you, right? Yeah. And that's the hardest thing. And we don't trust coaches as much as we used to. Okay. And there's maybe really good reasons for that. I'm not saying there isn't, but we don't trust our coaches as much as they used to be able to help parents along in that process. Whereas I think, maybe back to when Derek, but definitely back when I was growing up, like even my youth coaches, they knew me. They knew my family. The high school coaches, they knew me. They knew my family, right? That is much less and less, and it's kind of two sides. Coaches are scared to get too close. That's true, because they've been burnt, and parents are scared to let their kids get too close because they've been burnt in different areas, right? And that's ultimately why you get hired and paid the big bucks to talk to people to help solve all of those issues, Jamie. That's exactly it. That's why you get the big bucks, so you can solve all those issues. But I want to let you give a final point before we let you go. I think you are phenomenal.
Well, I appreciate that. I want to give two thoughts on the connecting with your athletes and parents issue that I've seen very effective. One is in the off season. I think if you have a kid that, let's say, plays basketball, plays baseball, wrestles, Show up to their games, their matches, and not just to the ones that you like, not just the kids you like. This is a great time to melt the ice a little bit with the parents and the kids that maybe you don't have a great relationship with. Now, don't sit with them. If they're a basketball player and you don't have a great relationship, don't sit with them for the whole game. That's awkward. But what you can do is just, you know what? You see them, you 30 seconds, say, hey, I really enjoyed watching Jalen play today. Okay, great. The next game, maybe it's a minute, and you say, hey, Jalen took that charge in the third quarter. That was really cool. That was awesome. Okay, that's all. You keep it very simple, but you do these little connection points with these parents and or the kids during the off season, and that'll start building up. We talk about putting some emotional deposits into that bank account. It's not going to make them love you, but it's going to start that relationship going more positive. During your season, utilize the first 5 to 10 minutes before practice. Pick out 3, 4, 5, 6 kids a day that you're going to go up to and have just a minute to 2 little conversation, not about the practice above, but you already figured it out. Okay, I know that Jalen loves Kansas City Chiefs. All right, I'm going to ask him about Patrick Mahomes. Or I know he loves, listening to Drake, and Drake's coming in concert soon. Hey, you going to that Drake concert or whatever. I would do that actually as a basketball coach toward the end of my career. We would do that, hey, Jalen's shooting free throws at the side basket. I'm going to go up and just start rebounding for him, talk to him for 1 minute or so. And then at the end of that 1 minute, I'm not going to say, all right, well, it's Jimmy's turn. I'm going to go talk to Jimmy over here now. No, you just hand the ball back to him. Hey, great. I'm looking forward to practice today. It's going to be great. Keep it up. Great form today. I love that. But you're talking to him in just little things, and you already know what you're going to talk to him about. And you can almost make a list, a list of these players. Now it's easier in basketball than it is in football because you have more players, but you could start with assistant coaches doing this as well. So you could cover more ground
and not their position.
That's a good point too.
It's one of the reasons I love doing special teams. I get to interact with every kid every single day, position, whatever. And that's like pre-practice, during stretch, go, hey, how was school? Or just some random type of thing.
But you may have to be intentional.
Know their name. I don't care if you have to have a cheat sheet. Go out there with a number.
I don't know how people don't know kids' names.
Put their tape.
100%. It's literally, I try to, and this is tough, but if you can interact with every kid, whether it's just a, hey, what's up, a fist pound every day, try and get a kid and say, hey, or every kid every day if you can. If not, break it down to certain days. Make sure they know who you are, what you're all about. Don't just be that guy that's only there, from this time to this time and only coaches your position. Those things matter to these guys. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's a great point. But be intentional.
Yes.
If you go up to little Chris and you say, hey, I know that you whatever, pick your esport, that or video game that he plays. I know that you love Overwatch. I just saw the other day that Pat Mahomes, I don't know if this is true at all, but Patrick Mahomes loves playing Overwatch before games or, after games to unwind or whatever. He's going to remember that conversation, even though 100%. It took 1 minute. And that starts that ball rolling of connecting with these players. And it doesn't mean that they won't transfer. It doesn't mean that we'll run through the wall for you every time, but it starts that process. And it might give you 1 extra week with them where they don't think you're a mean monster or something.
Absolutely.
Right. That would be positive, that they don't think you're a mean monster.
That's a good thing.
Can't be that.
I'm sure I've been accused of being a mean monster at times. So
I think we all have.
Yeah. Yep. No doubt about it. Well, listen, Jamie,
if you're doing it right, then at some point that's going to happen. Right?
Jamie, the website is jamybechler.com, right?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. Jamie, guys, go to jamybechler.com. Check him out. Reach out to him. It's been great having you on. It's I think your insight is unbelievably valuable, and the things that you have, because you've been at multiple levels and multiple roles. Right. You have understand all those perspectives, which I think is really unique. It's been great giving you insight, and I'll tell you, you hit on so many topics in a really positive way and a positive approach to solving things, because they are sports is really, really difficult, and it's more difficult than people realize until you get into it, because like, I said, in the old days, like, you kind of, this group of kids were the good athletes for the most part, and they kind of did sports, and all these other kids kind of went and worked in high school, and that world has changed. Everybody does sports from the time they're really young. I don't care what level they are, and they're all aspirational to have some level of success in sports, and that has changed dramatically. So these issues that may not have been huge issues when they've always been issues, but may not have been as big as they are now, because you have so many more people playing sports in general, and multiple levels of sports, and travel versus rec versus high school versus college. All these different types of things are all melting, and people are all trying to navigate this process. Coaches, athletes, parents, administrators, everybody. And it's difficult. I don't think when sports started to come around that anyone ever thought it would become the basically biggest thing in society as a whole. I mean, you look at it, what is the number one live show in every season is usually a sport, some football game, some basketball game, some, sporting event is the number one live show. And if you were to go back 60, 70 years ago, it would have been like, when the president was speaking or something like that. That's radically changed. That's a change in society, and obviously it makes what you do. You wouldn't have a job if this wasn't such an important thing, but it makes what you do really, really important, because you're that go-between to help people solve those issues. Can't thank you enough for coming on.
Appreciate it, Coach. Thanks for taking the time, man.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great day.
Enjoy, man. Appreciate you.
That was phenomenal.
Awesome. A lot of good perspectives there from a guy that wears a lot of hats, that sees a lot of things, that's done a lot of things at numerous levels. You know what I mean? Like college, high school, all that kind of stuff. So I thought that was just incredible insight. Really can help out our viewers and help us out. I learned a ton.
Absolutely.